Hi, welcome to the Prime People Podcast. And if you are looking to gain an understanding of marketing tactics that actually work in 2021, what is cutting edge, what people are using today to generate real business, convert, and actually create a concise marketing strategy, today is going to be an episode you're going to want to stick around for. Camille Moore, the owner of BirdEye Insights, is around, and I've had some insight into seeing some of the work that she's done. And she is a black belt in that industry and is very well educated and doing things that I think not a lot of people are doing in the marketing space. There are levels to this game, and we're going to dig into some of her thoughts when it comes to Google reviews and a whole bunch of other stuff that maybe you're not doing, but could actually change your life. So the episode of Prime People today is centered around marketing, but we cover all things business, real estate, media, and entrepreneurship. And on that note, we are very, very excited. We are dropping this month our free PDF guide to getting started on YouTube. And since you're watching it perhaps on our YouTube platform, this is a good way for you to get some clarity around how YouTube can change your life, how you can get a strategy to implement, put in that time, and then maybe layer some of Camille's tips on top of that. So really excited to get started with the show. So stick around. This is going to be a fun one. Welcome to the Prime People Podcast, where we cover all things that got us to where we are today, our team building strategies, the marketing and sales tips that we've learned through thousands of transactions, productivity tips, ways to really just hold yourself accountable to accomplishing what you want to accomplish, and all things content creation, personal development, and not to mention we have some of the best guests on the planet. Yeah, we've had people like Ryan Serhant, Scott McGilvery, Todd Duncan, and now Camille Moore. We got to spend some time together last week while we were doing that shoot, and it was very interesting to hear some of your thoughts when it comes to marketing and, you know, companies' voices, right? And you explained to me last week how marketing is much more than just putting out a mailer, right? And I think people are very confused about that. So why don't we start the conversation off there about what do you think marketing actually is?
Marketing is absolutely every aspect of your business, from the first moment that they see any kind of asset or mention of your brand or name, to the first moment that someone walks through your office, to the last, whether it's the transaction or the last paper served. We live in an experience economy, and you need to ensure that the experience beginning to end is nailed, because that is your marketing.
Very true. And what you just said is something people overlook, right? It's beyond just the paid advertisement. It's when you walk into a business, you said this to me last week, and you get greeted by a receptionist in such and such a way where the receptionist understands the voice of that company. So let's step back a couple feet.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know you've done some education with Harvard, Western, you're a practitioner even more than educated. So it's a pretty in-depth conversation to say, hey, Camille, you know, fix my marketing. Where would you even start with a company to help them even understand what their voice is and then train their organization to understand this concept that it is a 360-degree solution?
I think one soundbite that came out of last week that I actually heard for the first time and I've been using ever since is TEI doesn't work for people, we work with people. So the first thing is to ensure that we're the right fit, because it's more than just kind of, I'd say, what the execution is. It's like the strategy before you even get there. And you need to ensure that you're strategically aligned, and that I genuinely kind of agree / understand the purpose of your business, your unique selling propositions, and what's kind of under the hood before we even kind of decide to work together.
All right, so let's have some fun. Tell me,
all right.
You know, if you didn't know me and I told you, I have a real estate company and I want to be the very best in customer service and blah, 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 the normal boring stuff you hear from everybody in my business.
Yeah.
How would you dig a little bit deeper with somebody like myself to find that?
Real estate's just also a super weird industry too. Right? And real estate I've worked a lot with. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to so much in real estate. It's so much about the experience. I mean, you and I could speak at this ad nauseum. I think the kind of general perception of real estate is not how complicated the actual role is, how saturated it is, how competitive it is and how much goes into it to actually be among the like successful top echelon within that industry. So there's so many questions I need to ask, but for you, like the first thing I would do is just kind of gather some facts and take a look at what does your inventory look like? What does your kind of demographic look like based off of kind of the properties that you're selling? Are you speaking to that customer properly? Are you speaking to it well? That would probably even kind of gauge if I'm going to even have a conversation first, because there's nothing worse than being snobby to like to not who I guess your kind of inventory is, if that makes sense and is politically correct to say. But
well, no, what you said, like I do see that in my industry, right? Where if I'm going to do a farm deal, which in our territory is like ultra luxury, right? Your $30 million properties are like farm properties. They're not typically houses. You know, I'm not going to wear a suit and tie because they typically don't trust me when you walk in the door. They just think, well, he's a salesman. But then if I'm selling a luxury home in Upper Richmond Village, then yeah, they kind of have a level of expectation. So presentation, do you think people are doing their customers justice by speaking to them in their language, or changing who they are and maybe not being authentic by trying to match their voice? Because
I want to even take one step back further. Like there's almost like two issues. There's like the way that you speak to your customers online. And that if we go back to your kind of example of like, you know, I come to you with kind of the same things that everybody else wants them to do an audit. Like the first thing is like, what do you even have online? Because that's the kind of the first part of this conversation is the only way people buy is through their phones. Like bygone are the days of like, you walk down the street and you use like your closest realtor, or your closest doctor. Like you will travel 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to seek out the best person. So like, that's kind of like step one. Like if you're not online, I have really nothing to go off of. Two, there's a difference between how you speak to your customer in the actual like human interaction of like, you showed up to the farm. But before we even get there, how are you speaking to them online? Like, are you even getting yourself that opportunity? And I think that's where our conversation was so interesting last week, is that discrepancy between so many businesses of how they promote themselves through marketing, and then that failure to commit to that brand when they actually convert, and how that haunts you through reviews. So there's two issues. Like to your point, once you actually get the job and you show up, you have to communicate to that customer in the way that they want to be communicated to, or what kind of fits their bill. But you also want to ensure you get that opportunity by speaking to who your top customer is through online channels.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, we talked about this last week, and it was, you know, great marketing exposes bad businesses. So it doesn't really matter how good your marketing is at converting a lead. Like when they walk through the door and they're not tracking to be the same human that you were in your marketing, I do think that's where there's a huge disconnect, right? So let's get into some tactical stuff of, you know, let's say we've established our core identity, and I'll use myself as a case study because you know me a little bit, and, you know, I own a real estate organization, Prime, and our goal is to work with, you know, people that appreciate value, right? That understand that they're happy to pay for something if they're getting above average service. And that's our clientele that we're speaking to. Our messaging is fairly clear internally, right? I think our internal communications team is very dialed in of, you know, we kind of, same as the whole crew you work with, you know, we demand excellence in the work that we do, but we're not afraid to look back and change how we do things. How would I get, say, those two pieces out? Say I'm a premium quality service that brings a lot of value, and I'm constantly trying to grow and work on my company. Like, how would you methodically then say, okay, Justin, this is what we're going to do? Like, is it a print mail campaign? Is it Google? Is it reviews? Like, how are you going to walk me down that path?
You as a case study is a really interesting case, because not only do you kind of have like hardcore values of like integrity, hard work, like execution, but you're also very tech focused. So like technology is also like a massive part of your brand. It is also part of your value and how you differentiate your service offering to clientele. So what's interesting about you as a case study is you like, first and foremost, are kind of like the perfect case study of who I'd want to work with, because you already understand that as the CEO, you also kind of have to be a CMO or wear that CMO cap. Like, you are constantly marketing yourself, you're marketing your business. And that's where I think that tech aspect of your brand and business comes through, because in wearing your CMO cap, you're kind of ahead of the curve. Now, for you, and I think it's what we talked about, is like doing more kind of sophisticated marketing of like, because you're already 20 miles ahead of kind of where I would say everybody else is. Like, you understand like sophisticated target marketing, heat mapping, like utilizing like very niche marketing tactics to get those niche marketing clientele. So for you, absolutely not traditional. But what's interesting is, because you're doing digital so well, it'd be interesting to do kind of like some kind of a renaissance of like, how can we even leverage what you're doing through tech to like go kind of traditional route to like disrupt that in its own way. And like that would be cool. And I have some ideas that I would mull around further, but it would be interesting to actually do the reverse for you, see what that would look like.
But so I am gonna pause you there for a second, because you just said something that we've been mulling over internally for about a month. So there's a broker out there. His name's Andy Tse. He's in Silicon Valley, probably the #1 agent in North America. This guy is on track to sell $1 billion of real estate. And we chopped it up the other day, and like, he's the opposite, right? He's very traditional. He's the signs. He's lit every grocery cart in every neighborhood he's in, and he was really giving me a deep dive into the marketing strategy. And I think what you just said is bang on to where he said the industry is, right? Where like, I gave him some tips on what he can do from the digital side. And like, I do wear that hat, but I also do understand there's an inherent value on the other side of the coin, because not all attention is at any one place, right? And you do believe in 360-degree marketing solutions, starting with the receptionist to digital to traditional. And one of the interesting things that you were doing early on that, through proximity I saw, was the influencer marketing, right? Where you're saying, hey, listen, we're going to throw this event, we're going to bring these people in, and you're going to expose these people's audiences to your audience. Can you explain a little bit of strategy around how that's effective and why it's effective?
Influencer marketing it was one of the moments where I was like, I kind of stepped out of that like imposter syndrome box when I was like in this room with these like older senior executives, and I was like teaching them like the nuance of like influencer and like social media, like faux pas and best practices. And that was like a really interesting career moment. But influencer strategy, it comes like, that's the most important part of that sentence is strategy. Like you can't just use people with connections or celebrities for it to necessarily work. Like, it has to be rooted in you actually like coming up with a plan and strategy in order for you to like measure success out of it. And that's where, before I explain kind of influencer strategy and where it's successful, where I think a lot of people kind of fall into this black box of digital marketing is like social media, like influencer marketing, Instagram posts, Google AdWords, like it all can be a massive waste of money and completely ineffective if it's not backed by strong strategy. But because there's a lower barrier to entry, it's easier to access, it costs less, you see more mess. And the same thing happens with influencer strategy. So if most people watching this are in the service space, you want to leverage influencers in a way that's going to make sense for your business. So if your core demographic, Justin, is realtors, to utilize influencers, probably the best way would be to tap into a younger demographic. If you're looking to kind of tap into those millennials that will be buying a home in the next few years, and how that would work, what I think would vary by kind of like who your brand is. So for you, for Prime, we had kind of mulled around doing some kind of like house parties and like dream homes, having kind of someone who's either a celebrity chef or a well-known chef in the area, have influencers, whether an influencer in and of itself can be broken down into different kind of vernacular. Like there's micro influencer, which can be by like general terminology, 10,000 or less followers. And that was like the word of the year in 2021 because it was way more effective.
That's me. I'm like around 10K, so I'm a micro influencer.
You're a micro influencer.
That's funny.
But they actually, like, I mean, they as in, I forget who it is right now, but it was one of the, like,
Sure.
the big tech companies. They actually analyze like the data, and social users have become more weary to like the big followers, not so much like the Kim Kardashian. I would say she's kind of more of like that outlier of actually does drive buying decisions.
But the 50 to like 200K that you're like in this dodgy place where like, did they just buy their following? Because it's almost like so big
there's
so
no way
quickly.
to vet it.
Yeah.
But to that point too, like, because I work in the service space, Justin, like, what benefit is it to you to have someone who has 500,000 followers where 490 of them are in Indonesia? Like, that's not going to affect your business, period. And that's where I'm like, where like the word strategy has to come into if we're even chatting about influencers. And one thing I want to chat about quickly about the kind of the renaissance of traditional marketing. One of the things that absolutely makes me want to bang my head against a wall is when people, like, when it comes to marketing, I want to use kind of the word like period. Like, you have to have a digital strategy because you have to look at the psychology of the buy. Like, billboards do work. It's just people aren't walking by a billboard and are like typing down the phone number that's in the billboard. The first thing they do is they Google it. So like that's where you, and going through like kind of a renaissance, the first thing people are going to do when they drive by that billboard every day is top of mind. When they do need a realtor, they're going to Google it. But then at that point, you want to be tapping into third-party cookie data, right? That's where you want to have a robust digital marketing plan where like Instagram and Facebook listen to you. So if you're talking about prime brokerage in your car, you're probably going to spurt. If you're not investing it, you're not going to see it. But because I know that you are, you'll start seeing Instagram and Facebook ads of prime brokerage. If you're talking like, and that's where
like you're talking physically talking, right? Talking to somebody that's driving with you. That's great. And that's what everybody's like, oh my gosh, my phone's listening to me. Like, it actually is, right?
It actually is. And that's where it's almost like it's not one without the other. If you're going to invest in one, like you're like up here. For someone who's like, where do I start? You don't need to invest in both. You just got to get online. Like, that is where people are buying. Yep. It's just that traditional marketing does work. But if you're going to invest in traditional marketing, you have to have sophisticated digital marketing because that's the psychology of the buy. The way that they actually convert and they shop is through that experience of like outside world into digital world metaverse of like what happens with like when you're within the phone.
I always joke that the only people that look at billboards are other agents that say, maybe I should get a billboard. But it's the ever-presence thing, right? So they see you on the billboard and then they see my video pop up and they're like, wait a second, same guy. Oh, okay, he must be somewhat trustworthy. And then here's the real key, though. You know, you talk about it being an easier barrier to entry. This is why I brought you on, right? You are so concise and so focused on Google reviews. And I think so many people overlook that, right? You can wax poetic on that topic, and I want you to, because I don't think people necessarily understand that not only like does the ever presence actually have an impact, but when they're dealing with somebody who's already seen testimonials, they're not selling anymore. Like, that person's calling them and wants their time, not, you know, that you're calling them and you're begging them to do their deal. So can you explain a little bit around Google and why a review strategy is so important?
Yeah. So first and foremost, it's an objective fact that humans buy off of other human sentiment, period. Like, and we've seen that through the history of human existence, but through the transition into the digital space, why Amazon is so heavily weighted in bestsellers, who's reviewed the highest, who has the most reviews, whether it's negative or positive reviews, and how we use those to buy, right? Like, we use the experience that other people have as a way to determine where we're going to spend our money. So in the service space, this is a bit of a long-winded answer, so bear with me on this.
No, it's all good.
Google's entire, so Google first and foremost is also on a profitability size of a nation state. Most nation states, like, they are quite literally in the most for-profit business. And in order for them to take and keep that stake, they aim to be the arbiter of relevance and truth. So when you Google a question, you know for certain through deductive experience that answer is not only correct, but you will diagnose yourself on it. You will.
That's so true.
Like, it is the absolute answer of truth for us. Like, if you're questioning a family or friend, you Google it. Like, it's a colloquial term of how you get truth. So when it comes to the service industry, so Google aims to be the most relevant. So let me take a step back. So if you type in hair salon near me, Google is going to pull up five selections, and those are often going to be the most highest rated. Now, through your experience that is actually going to be a hair salon, and it is not going to be a Hell's Angel hideout. It's not going to be a dog grooming salon. It's going to be exactly what you were looking for. And there's always, unless you live in a small town, there's always more than the 5 hair salons that they pull. Google pulls those based off of the only thing that it has. That is the most relevant answer. And one of the ways, or the most, if it's triage, the most ranked reason why that is pulled up is because of other human sentiment. So there's only so many things Google can go off of, and other people's opinion of you as a service provider is one way in which Google presents you as the most relevant answer. So if you're someone that is starting up, or someone that's been a legacy player that is scared and wanting to kind of find a way to survive the next decade, the first and foremost focus needs to be on Google reviews. And the kind of like analogy that we use is it's like investing in Toronto real estate 20 years ago. Like it's your real estate on the internet. And it's something that, as far as my assumption goes, is this is how Google is going to continue to kind of rank relevant service providers. And one, I think, kind of combative point that I get from clients is they're nervous about bad reviews. And I mean, my argument to that is, not all experiences or relationships in life are necessarily positive. Especially when you're in the service industry, the outcome is not always necessarily up to you, like especially in real estate.
For sure.
There's just things that are out of your control. And using a negative, negative reviews are a great opportunity for you to make something right, for you to call a client to ask them to take it down by making it right, or by responding to it and giving your opinion as a business, right? Like the bad reviews can be, outside of it being like, you're bad at what you do and you're a horrible human being, can be used in your favor and in order for you to kind of make it right, or to kind of give yourself your own 2 cents.
Yeah, you're bang on about that. There was a incident a couple of years ago, actually. We had taken over a build project, and we had a whole bunch of sales that were closing that weren't done by us. They were done by the previous people who had the site. And lo and behold, unto me, a year after that, I had actually fired that builder because I wasn't happy with the way they were doing things and whatnot. And long story short, a client called me from previously, and I actually, something happened with the fireplace. Like he ended up spending $7,000 on a fireplace that they didn't do properly and everything else. And I said, listen, I wasn't even involved in that file whatsoever, but my name was attached to it during the time that you were actually closing. So you know what? I'm going to sell your house for free, because he was looking to buy another house. And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, we charge what we charge. And I'm like, you're not going to pay a listing commission. I'm going to eat the marketing cost, the staging cost. I'm going to do a whole sale for you for free, because my name was on the sign when you guys were going through the closing. I didn't do your deal, but I need to make it right. And that client ended up being probably one of my biggest advocates. We had a great conversation after the fact, and it's an opportunity, right? And I think people need to stop being so scared of getting a negative review, because you're scared of something that's never really happened. So you're not going to go out and get 100 reviews that you could possibly get that could change the future of your business, because you're scared of the one review that may never come. It's kind of a backwards way of thinking. So
Totally is.
So if I did have legacy, right, and I want to go back to, say, 500 deals I closed, what's a strategy to actually get reviews? Do I just call them one by one? Do I send them a link? What does that actually look like?
One of the best softwares that I found on the market is one called BirdEye, and it's not used enough in Canada. It's an exceptional program that basically streamlines the review process. So it would connect with whatever CRM program you're working with. as kind of, okay, so let me take a step back. So this program BirdEye, it streamlines the review process. So the first thing a business owner, when they're kind of like, they hear me talk about the review spiel, they're like, holy shit, I've been in business for 20 years. I have probably 500 clients. What do I do? How do I access them? So you pull, ideally, you have some record of this. You pull a CSV. I get you in contact with a company called BirdEye. We get it set up so that all of your past reviews, we basically kind of create like an SOP, standard operating procedure, for those who are confused by my acronyms, big acronym person. And we will like send out kind of an email saying like a review is going to come. It really helps us as small businesses. We'd really appreciate it. Or if you have the budget, you know, kind of even like a $5 Timmy's gift card, it's worth your weight in gold to get that many reviews. So trust me, it's worth it. It's worth the Timmy gift cards. You kind of send out that blast. And then what this program does that's awesome is that it streamlines that review going out forever moving forward.
Okay.
And what's awesome about that is you can set up either through your CRM system or internally within your company at what point the client is at its happiest, which would be the most likely that they are to leave a review as well as a positive review, right? Like, to your point, Justin, I think that that's kind of the main takeaway is you obviously want to have outstanding experience because you want 5-star reviews, but you shouldn't allow that. Like, you should still give great service. You still want to only have really great reviews, but you shouldn't be afraid of the outlier that is grumpy, a bad person. That's almost like another conversation that we can have is like, you also, because the experience can haunt you, should be picky with who you bring on.
For sure.
Because sometimes you just don't gel with them, and you should kind of see those warning signs beforehand because that experience can haunt you. So that's like a separate conversation. Yeah,
it doesn't have to. No, that's okay. I got excited and that's why I jumped in, right? I have clarity of that in the beginning of the conversation. I said, I work with people that appreciate a premium value-driven service, right? Like my clients, I want them to wish they paid me 10% commission when we're done and be like, I made so much more money than I would have on my own. Didn't have to worry about anything. Like that's how we're built. And I've got the clarity of purpose that the first conversation I have with them isn't, well, will you do it for 1%? Like there's lots of people out there that you can find that'll do that. We're not on the same planet. Like I don't necessarily want those clients. I would love to talk to them and show them value-driven service, but there's a clear disparity. And, you know, I was in the service industry prior to being in real estate. I worked for Mike Smith for years. And I can tell you the same person that's miserable about a real estate experience that maybe was a 5-star experience is the same person that's miserable when they go to the restaurant, the gym's not working out for them, they go to the bank, they're angry at the teller. Like you're going to find those people everywhere. And I do think the public sees that, right? The Wolf Brothers, I remember they had a negative review on like one of their restaurants. You talk about guys that care so much about what they do. And I remember talking to Justin and being like, dude, nobody that matters cares about that review. And the review tore him up because he's like, this is my like blood, sweat, and tears. And I'm like, I get it. Nobody that actually matters cares about that one person's comment because the way it was written showcased their character, right? So
yes. And to that point, like that's where you have to feel bad for like the service industry where they can't control who comes into their restaurant or who comes into their front door. But if you're a service provider where it's like service in kind, like a realtor, like a doctor, like a lawyer, like a marketer, you have that ability to be selective and you should use it because the idea is you should love what you do, but we also live in as one downside to this, a super transparent world where that entire experience can haunt you. So use your service space and the how special it is in that instance to your favor, not against you when you can. Because I was in the service industry too, and I think like I read this book the other day. And I was a server for years. And in this book, it was like so simple, but it was such an aha moment. They're like, you are no longer a waitress. Like the customer is no longer right. Like you can actually be selective on who you choose to work with. And you are an expert in your space. So those who you choose to work with, to your point about like value-based services, they're hiring you because you're the best, Justin. So the idea is that if you're saying to them, hey, this house is not worth that dollar, and they're fighting you on it, like they're not the right fit for you. You're the expert in the space. They're not.
I love that so much. Actually, I had a couple people in the back channels. I dropped the BirdEye link in there, and they're asking me, how it can be used. I just told them to connect with you because I know you have a direct link to BirdEye, right? So anybody that's interested in BirdEye and that whole, hey, I just want somebody to manage that for me instead of you training your staff, you can connect with Camille. I know she has a direct link to that company, and it's pretty cool too because they do some interesting management stuff on the back end that you can't do as a consumer because of the volume of business that they do. Shout out to Jaime Resendez. He's an awesome real estate agent, crushes YouTube, has a massive channel, and so is UACE. UACE is in Toronto in the GTA. Thanks for coming by, guys. Really appreciate all the love. So I'm going to get into a bit of a rapid fire session, and then I'm going to get you out of here, Camille. I know we can do this all day long, but I've got 7 questions that I typically ask every single guest. So, you can just answer them in whatever context that you want, and just kind of first thing that comes to mind. So what's the greatest lesson that you've ever learned is the first question.
Nothing worth having comes for free.
And how did you find that out?
The most rewarding things in life is the experience of earning it. It's not the stuff that's given. And I think that I'm still going through it of building a company, working with the team, dealing with like the new problem of what it's like to manage humans, to delegate, to let go of control, and just looking back and watching the climb. I think that's probably one of the best gifts I've ever been given.
Danelle Delgado and I were chopping it up. I was listening to her speak in a room the other day, and she was talking about how when she was trying to go from $10 to $15 million a year, she struggled. She couldn't break past that. And she said when she got to 100 million, it was letting go of all of the control and delegating and getting around the right people. People that, get to the top of the mountain, it's always the story of how they got there. It's not necessarily what they get at the top of the mountain. So that's awesome. You heard these questions too. I think you have a little bit of an edge as to most of our guests because you heard me asking some of these questions last week. But what are you learning right now? I know a lot of people, they're good at the main things that matter, but I know your brain's probably thinking 5 steps ahead. What's that 20% that you're like, this is interesting, or what are you actually actively learning right now?
Oh, what a great question. Actually, bad preface. I was not ready for this one. What am I learning right now? I
could answer it for you because I heard you say it last week, and it was you're a consumer of content and you understand how a platform like TikTok really does have an impact, right? So I think that's interesting for me to watch you do working with executives. It's almost like you're doing the work for them in that space, right?
Well, to that point, I think what I'm learning is that to give things a chance, right? Like I feel like I completely wrote TikTok off, and I actually which was ridiculous because I'm someone that rode the coattails of Canva before it became big, knew all the influencers before they became huge. And here I am already kind of wiggling my finger when this new platform comes out, and I slept on it. Like I met this woman 2 weeks ago who was let go from her job during COVID, saw it as an opportunity to start giving marketing tips on TikTok, and got signed by Nintendo among many other huge brands. And she lives down the street here in Toronto. And I think TikTok in general is something that I'm learning a lot about right now, and the importance of being on. So any service provider that's watching this right now that maybe had the same sentiment as I did, it's no longer for kids. Like the largest demographic that's growing on it is 30 plus. The algorithm is absolutely brilliant. That's why we've heard so much about it. And we really are sleeping as service providers by not focusing time and energy on it. So Justin saw the trend coming. Get on it while you can now before it gets too saturated.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's just being in that white space right before other people are. So who do you know that I should know? And it can be anybody. It can be somebody that's in the media, maybe a thought leader, books you're reading, something along those lines. Is there anybody that you find influential, that you find fascinating these days?
Something we talked about last week, I think the future. The future is someone who I had my own kind of like Gloria Steinem feminist moment, but in marketing moment, where I think a lot we talked about today of like being confident in that you're an expert in what you do, like being able to say no, being aware of that Like, your time is valuable. You have to love what you do, and you should align yourself with clients and customers who you connect with. The Future, spelt FUTR. Although his stuff kind of talks about like value-based pricing and getting away from hourly, I think that he's got a lot of really great anecdotes that are great for anyone in the service industry and really being able to position themselves on price.
Yeah, I think it's important. Actually, I had a clarity conversation with my wife about what we're doing with the production team. And we actually made a decision that we're only working by referral. Like, you can't get access to my production team unless it's somebody like yourself or your organization, just because it's not really worth our time to take our focus off our core business unless it's to support a proximity business that we do believe in, right? And I think, you know, building a community of like-minded businesses is fun because this doesn't even feel like work when you're chopping it up with somebody in their space, right? So I'm gonna ask you one more question, the most important question I could possibly ask you, because you took time out of your schedule for this. How can I add value to you? If I was gonna tell people to go find you somewhere, is there a project you're working on? Anything that we can do to add value to Camille?
I think the less transactional one is, I really would love some reading recommendation. If you guys have heard kind of anything that I've been talking about that you think that connects to what I'm saying, I'd love to hear some books. I mean, of course, Be Our Guest. Perfect.
So it's how they built Disney and the customer service aspect of that. This is actually for one of my staff members who loves Disney. So there's one for you. But everybody else, please, please, please send Camille some book recommendations and then hit me up anytime. This is another one, actually a local guy. Tommy Caldwell wrote a book called Heavy Brain.
Cool.
This is a fascinating read. It's all in the health and fitness space.
Cool.
But he exposes MLMs. He exposes how our brains are wired, that, you know, you ate the large pizza when you got home because you didn't do something to distract yourself from ending up on the couch looking at your phone, ordering skip the dishes, right? It's a fascinating read. So
cool.
Definitely appreciate your time, Camille. Like I said, anybody that wants to connect with her for BirdEye, go check out her stuff. We'll have all the links in the bio as well. And I will catch you on the flip side. See you, Camille.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
See ya.